Welcome to the Join or Die on Earth podcast. This is a podcast I created to support my upcoming candidacy for the Sarah campaign. I'm bringing together different people who value having omics data accessible to them for the purposes of space exploration and human health beyond Earth. Joining us today is Yash Shevde, the founder and CEO of Ursa Bio. His company, Ursa, is working on medical challenges for long-duration spaceflight, and he's a co-author on a seminal paper in Nature, a perspective piece titled A Second Space Age, spanning omics, platforms, and medicine across orbits. Welcome, Yash.
Thanks, Elia, for having me on the show. I'm on that paper alongside you, so very excited to be here and discuss more about aerospace medicine.
Absolutely. How about we start off with what is Ursa Bio and what are you guys doing?
Yeah, Ursa Bio is a aerospace medicine company pioneering what we call space care. So space care is essentially using human spaceflight to make discoveries for terrestrial health issues that arise among populations that are analogous to health issues that arise in space as well. So kind of the canonical example that you know only too well is musculoskeletal degradation, which we could use as an example. If you lose muscle mass and bone density on Earth due to age, menopause, prolonged endurance training, you can also use spaceflight where musculoskeletal degradation occurs way faster than it does on Earth as a platform to accelerate your discoveries. So that's one component of it. And then we're also developing small molecule assets in-house that address the myriad issues that arise during human spaceflight, trying to help us get it ready to go back to the moon and then on to Mars.
What are the major scientific challenges you've encountered?
Well, there are different kind of there are different ways of characterizing the scientific challenges. There are, of course, a lot of open questions just conceptually when it comes to the reasons why certain health issues arise. Like there are a lot of hypotheses that are pretty much understood in the field as being true, but they haven't been conclusively proven. I could give a couple examples of this. One would be, ocular loss. My understanding as an ex-physicist is that fluid shifts and increased pressure in the upper extremities explains that way better than any other cause, but it could be mitochondrial dysfunction. It could be radiation. We don't know how this multifactorial system of different inputs and interactions and stresses from the environment are giving rise to each of these conditions. So that's kind of one scientific challenge. At a meta scale, I would say there's another scientific challenge, which is that
Well,
the
I
whole
want to pause there. I love the eyesight one. That was my area of study when I was in grad school, was I'd
yeah,
characterize the retina
yeah.
of mice that had been flown on the International Space Station, and we
Hmm.
found gene expression changes similar to retinitis pigmentosa, which was a
Hmm.
cone rod photoreceptor disorder. So we could actually see degradation of rods and cone cells at the molecular level.
Amazing.
Yeah, I have some unpublished data now on like single cell RNA sequencing and some ATAC-seq and some spatially resolved transcriptomic data from NanoString that I'm hoping to get out soon. But yeah, it could be mitochondria. It seems like a lot of it though is compression. So it is
Hmm.
that fluid shift as far as
Yeah,
we know so far. Plus radiation doesn't help.
yeah.
Um,
The kind of aqueous filament that surrounds the optic fiber inflaming essentially due to there just being higher aqueous pressure in the upper extremities. That to me is just like a very simple, very elegant explanation, but I'm sure like the science goes way deeper. So that actually really helps paint a picture, like the fact that that data is still unpublished. We don't have 100% certainty about what gives rise to each of the issues that are arising in spaceflight. So that's one scientific challenge. Another major one that I would say is that the whole field has done such great work in the past 2 decades, especially from the shuttle era onwards with diagnostics. So, what are the issues that are arising for different demographics, age, sex, ethnicity in space? But one of the challenges there is that we as Ursa Bio want to shift the paradigm of the research being done in aerospace medicine from diagnostics to intervention. So the idea is, okay, we know the heavy hitters. We know musculoskeletal degradation. We know mitochondrial dysfunction, ocular issues, gut and skin microbiome issues, fluid shifts. And if that's going to be 80 to 85% of the issues that arise for each individual in space, if that's equal across everyone, with all of them they may have a unique dermatological condition, they may have a unique hearing issue like dizziness or vertigo, which would depend on each individual. But let's start addressing the major 85% is kind of where we want to shift the paradigm from diagnostics to intervention. So that's, I think, been a bit of a scientific challenge. I think it fits in that category because when you're trying to get data from a human spaceflight mission, every other research group and organization and university and collaboration group, working group that's looking at diagnostic data, they're going to have their toes stepped on if someone comes in with an intervention, because you don't know how their intervention is interfering with the diagnostics, the pure diagnostics data, the baseline diagnostics data.
So they're trying to study the disease in space still. They're trying to better characterize it, and you're coming in and intervening with it by trying to fix it. And
Yeah,
so you're basically the data that they're collecting is no longer this pure, effective space flight. It's not that foundational biology anymore. It has this confounder.
exactly.
So you said you want to address like the heavy hitting diseases of spaceflight with intervention. What's the strategy for that? Because we don't have these space missions are very small. Some of them are only for very short periods of time. Inspiration 4 is 3 days, Polaris Dawn was 5 days. Axiom Space, you get a couple of weeks on the space station. And then they're also all very small sample sizes, about 4 people per crew. Like, how many people do you need for the studies that you're looking at?
I mean, the more would be better, and that we hope to like enable that future where more people can fly to space, more people aren't being deselected because of health criteria. We want to lower the bar of entry. Everywhere across systems, people are always talking about raising the bar. We actually want to lower the bar of entry to human spaceflight, so the more the merrier. But to actually answer your question, like it's 100% true that we're going to be struggling with a small n problem for the foreseeable future. However, I think a human spaceflight is a very unique setting where we have very high signal per n. And what I mean by that is that because you have the astronauts' vitals all day long, you know exactly what they're eating, you know exactly how much they've worked out, you know all of the circumstantial data throughout the day. The signal per n, we believe, is going to be way higher in a trial or study in space than it will be on Earth. If you just take the structure of a traditional clinical trial on Earth, clinical trial recruitment and retention is a massive problem. You have to advertise the clinical trial, you have to find the people who meet the criteria, you have to convince them to take part in the study, you have to convince them of the safety and efficacy of the intervention you're trying to help validate. You have to keep track of them over time with check-ins. So, our kind of hand wavy hypothesis here, we hope to have the data to very soon to actually hammer in these numbers, but our hand wavy hypothesis here is that with 4 people and 4 weeks in space, you can generate the same amount of signal in a trial as you can with 400 people over 4 years on Earth. So
Yeah,
that's what we hope to work towards.
excellent. I mean, this is something I've been working on for years now, is trying to get as much data as possible collected on astronauts from their time in space, collecting blood, urine, stool, saliva, skin swabs, got skin biopsies from the Inspiration 4 crew, and then putting all of that data in the hands of different researchers, in the hands of different startup founders, in the hands of entrepreneurs, in order to help stimulate the space economy and get human health in space sort of off the ground, advance it from where it is now. And I noticed, so I published my data a few years ago, the Space Omics and Medical Atlas. We call it SOMA. I published that last year, just last year. I've
Right.
been working on it for 3 years, but I saw that you have the SOMA project listed on your website. Are you involved with SOMA? Are you using the SOMA data?
Well, as a venture scale startup, we're looking at data that's commercializable, that's revealing some IP that can be captured, novel insight that can actually help us bring an asset to market. So I am definitely kind of staying close to the source of the latest and greatest data. That's why we've been collaborating and talking for so long, and I'm very very well aware of all the foundational work you've done in building out not just that data set, but even before that. A quick comment you made that I wanted to touch on was, yeah, I've been very impressed, especially by Mason Lab, at how much data you're able to munge out of relatively small sample sizes, and make it into these fascinating publications and data sets that clearly are making waves and setting a new standard for what we want to see in the future of human spaceflight. To get back to your question, though, as of yet, we haven't made any sort of discovery from the data sets that would help lead us to an asset, but I'm sure in the very near future there will be one. I think it's more a function of our ability to search the vast quantities of data that's been generated, less so anything to say about the quality of the data or the nature of the
Yeah,
data.
So this is an issue too with the way the IRB is set up for the data that we put into Soma. We can only use it for research purposes. So in order to access the data, you have to have an IRB. So you have to be part of a research group at a research institution. And that's great. A lot of people access the data that way. But what would be really great is you mentioned like part of it's just a bottleneck on the ability to scan through that much data. It would be great if we could include SOMA data in educational curricula. The problem is the IRB doesn't allow for that. It can only be
Hmm.
used by researchers. So that is something we're thinking about. We're trying to put new data sets into the Personal Genome Project,
Oh, cool.
PGP, which is run
Awesome.
out of Harvard. George Church was the one who made that. And what that would enable us to do is actually take the if you publish your data in PGP, you have your genome, all of your genomic information online, and right next to it is basically your signature, your name.
Hmm.
There's no longer any worry about accidentally figuring out who someone
Right.
is. We're very concerned about privacy with Soma.
Hmm.
Everyone's anonymized. But if you have something open, all of a
Hmm.
sudden you don't need specialized oversight to access the data. Anyone can access it. So you can
Hmm.
actually start bringing curricula into undergraduate curricula, into high school curricula. You could make training sessions available to people much more easily who need career training. So I hear you there.
That's what I was about to ask you. I mean, what would your kind of plans be at the University of Austin to take this data and take it forward in the form of educational curricula?
Yeah. So at the University of Austin, we're building up programs right now from scratch anyway. So it would be a huge valuable resource to us to have novel data sets to create curricula around. Right now, our focus is a lot on AI and computer science, but pretty naturally branching off of that is computational biology.
Hmm.
That's where this field of astronaut omics and data analysis lies. And so it's going to be a pretty natural part of our evolution to start analyzing that type of data anyway. And I'm
Hmm.
hoping it can be actual astronaut data.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what you're talking about here with Soma ties back into what I said about high signal per n. The human biology is such a fascinating, interconnected, complex set of systems, not only just one system, that you want to have as varied an insight into the effect of interventions that you're trying to introduce. So what I mean by that, to give a more kind of specific kind of concrete example, let's say you have a potential intervention in acid that addresses musculoskeletal degradation. When you're administering that to an astronaut and doing pre and post or in situ sample gathering readings of the effect it's having, you also want to keep an eye on any potential side effects or effects it may be having across other systems as well that are chronologically logged in a way that you can map them to being an effect of the intervention you're trying, as opposed to being an emergent issue coming from human spaceflight, if
Mm.
that makes sense. So, if around the same time, let's say someone starts to see a bit drier skin, oilier skin, whatever it is, that's an insight that you'd want to look into. Even if it doesn't meet the standard of being a adverse side effect, that's still going to be something that you want to look at. And so that's where this highly multi-omic approach that you in your past work at Mason Lab and hopefully going forward at University of Austin are doing will be very handy for a company like Ursa Bio.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I'm really hoping that, this data, it's not just for researchers, it's not just for education, but we need data to start designing different types of therapeutics for
Hmm.
space flight.
For
And
sure.
hopefully, with the stations that are coming up from different commercial companies, with these plans for the moon, with these plans for Mars,
Yeah.
with Starship hopefully coming online soon,
Hmm.
which can carry much more people, or at least
Yep.
house them. Who knows if they'll be launched on Starship or if that'll be separate, but you can definitely it's gonna be a lot easier to keep a lot more people in space.
Yep.
Uh,
Very soon, much sooner than most people expect.
I think so.
Yeah.
In that case, what would you say to someone who's unsure about the investment or the effort that we need to put into space medicine? Why isn't this just relevant? Is it just relevant, or is there a sense of urgency that we need to do this?
Something that I've experienced a fair bit building Ursa in the venture capital ecosystem has been that a lot of people seem to think that it's too early to be working on this, and they're actually very surprised whenever I kind of illustrate the problem and point out that it leads to the conclusion that it's actually starting to get too late. If you take SpaceX's timelines seriously, which I always add 2 years, like that's not a slight on SpaceX at all. It's just they over overpromise and slightly under deliver.
Well, that's good. 2 years is about a Mars window. You
It's
can
about
launch
a Mars
one
window.
every two and
So
a half years. Yeah.
every time they mention something's going to happen during X Mars window, I just do X plus one Mars window. But if you take those timelines seriously, we're looking at an attempt at the first crewed Mars mission around the mid 30s. And if you take development timelines for biotech assets into consideration and just look at the historical trends, how long did it take to develop X asset? Or did it, given where the IP started and given the kind of standard of efficacy that had to be established. And if you put that timeline, you just overlap it on the timeline from now to the Mars window, things start to look very tight. And it's not only for just one indication. I mean, we have to have a very highly parallel process solving a lot of things that will help astronauts get ready for Mars. I mean, we can do a lot of screens. We can even potentially do a genetic screen. I remember our first conversation was you bringing me up to speed on GINA and how that may factor into a human spaceflight going to Mars.
The Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act.
That's right. Yeah. So the anti-Gattaca Act, as I call it. But yeah, I think there is a sense of urgency if you take into account just the amount of time it takes to develop even a small molecule intervention. And
Yeah.
I know people have very exciting ideas around, genomics interventions and other more complex interventions, but I struggle to see how we can get those done in time, even for the first potential crew to Mars mission.
Yeah. I mean, going by these timelines, do you think for the purposes of space applications, the way that we approve drugs in the US, I don't know exactly what the timeline is, but it can take a very long time.
Mhm.
Do you think there needs to be a specialized pathway for spaceflight that perhaps shortens that timeline in some way or changes the standards?
Actually, a lot of what we're doing as a for-profit company ends up being, like you're very much on the open science side of things. We're very much on the closed science side of things. I mean, our whole thing is about capturing IP, developing assets. But that's one area where I really hope Ursa can help make a contribution to the commons. We've been having very exciting conversations with the FDA, especially over the past few months, around how they may recognize data coming from astronauts,
Mm.
similarly to how you recognize data coming from other countries. People think that's like comparing apples and oranges, but if you think about it, I mean, when you're running a clinical trial in the Philippines or something like that, the demographics are significantly different in the test population as opposed to where they are in the target population. And so, as long as you can characterize a health issue as having arisen as a result of similar stressors on the human body, I think there's an argument to be made to the FDA that they should recognize data coming from astronauts the same way they do from another jurisdiction. Again, a great example here is musculoskeletal degradation, where like is just so well characterized in comparison between the two settings of spaceflight and terrestrial. Where terrestrially, if you're an elderly patient who's just been bedridden, highly sedentary, that maps to the effects of prolonged zero G. I mean, in fact, with mice, we've been doing the hind limb suspension as
Yeah.
kind of a model for zero gravity for a while. I mean, it's essentially the same things. I think there's a strong argument to be made with the FDA, and I actually feel pretty confident that we'll get to some sort of understanding around the turn of the year with the FDA. And once that pathway is open, it will be open not just for Ursa, but for everyone in the ecosystem. So we're very excited to be contributing towards that.
Yeah, it is exciting. So, developing the small molecule therapeutics, the different medicines that we need for flight, the different drug development. What's the business model of Ursa here? Is it to pick one drug, go really deep on it? Is it to, try a bunch of different things and see which one works? Do you want to have like a spectrum of different drug offerings that you can eventually give to astronauts, or what can we expect in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we hope to make accelerated discoveries in spaceflight and help our biotech partners and our own asset beat competitors to market by using the acceleration that spaceflight affords us. But the thing that gets me out of bed every day, and I think gets our team out of bed every day, is the vision of having the first crewed spaceflight to Mars. I want each astronaut to have a personalized medikit, you could call it, from Ursa Bio. And the components of that medikit will be, 85%. Again, as I mentioned, the heavy hitters, this will be musculoskeletal degradation. I've kind of rattled off the litany of issues that are going to arise in off-world living repeatedly now. So your audience probably knows it by now, but 85% of the assets are going to address those issues, and then the remaining 15%, I think, will be personalized medicine for the astronauts' unique conditions to arrest, ameliorate, prevent whatever we think based on the scans that they will be susceptible to. Because for Mars, especially, you're going to be on the other side of the sun. There's no helping you. The moon, relatively, especially once Starship comes online, and especially seeing the capabilities that SpaceX has now, you're relatively quite close. I mean, you can survive a kidney failure on the moon at this point. Like, we can get you back, or we can get a kidney to you. That's
On
not
the moon?
possible with, well, not like right now, but
But just like the
in a couple
timescales for
years.
how long it takes to launch things and
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but that's not going to be possible with Mars. So Ursa's business model is, at the moment, we're a biotech company and we operate like a biotech company. We provide a service to our biotech partners, which is helping them make accelerated discoveries. We develop our own assets. We identify, IP white space, and continue with a drug development program similar to what another drug development company would do. But I think on the order of about 4 to 5 years out, our customer base and our value creation kind of focus will shift from the terrestrial biotechs market to the space side. And Ursa wants to be a horizontal provider across any crewed mission. Anyone who's sending crew to off world, essentially, we want them to have Ursa as a solution for all of their crew health needs, for the emergent issues of human spaceflight. So rocket companies and habitat companies will always own survivability. So this is there enough air, food, and water? Are you filtering the air and water? Emergency protocols,
Yeah,
deadly
there are
radiation
macro
shielding,
issues before you get down to
the engineering solutions, exactly. But the emergent health issues of human spaceflight, I think, are still under addressed, and that's where Ursa hopes to make a contribution.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm trying my hardest to generate as much data for you and for all of these other companies and
Really
researchers as
appreciate it.
possible. What data that comes out of Soma, what data is it that we can generate in the lab that's most useful to you, particularly on the omic side, because that's what I focus on?
Well, again, that would be omics as a result of an intervention, I think.
Oh,
Kind
you
of
want the
just
intervention part.
we want the intervention part. Exactly. I think, I mean, the science is so interesting. I get it. I get the excitement. I get, there's such a long tail of fascinating discoveries to be made with diagnostics. But for us, truly, the value would be with an intervention. So basically, it's just upstream of the omics, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, the work can't possibly get any better. It's just simply
Like,
that we
what
want.
do you need more blood? Do you need more urine? Do you need more stool? Like, what is it I need to get? And what do I need to
Mhm.
sequence? Do you need the gene expression data, the protein profiles?
Well, it
What can I
depends on
serve
the
to you?
depends on well, I appreciate it putting that way. I would say currently, I mean, blood is of tremendous interest to us. I think blood, just uh, connects with a lot of different systems that we're looking at, and we'll have a lot of biomarkers. So, I'm really glad you asked this, because it's something I hadn't really revisited. I just kind of taken for granted. Okay, these are the volumetrics that we have to work with. Whatever discoveries we're going to make have to be able to be made out of, a few milliliters. But I mean, if we could get more blood, I mean, you can separate it, and you can look for different biomarkers in different samples. So more blood would always be great. I mean, I think some of the other ones that we would really like to see aren't really feasible. So I don't even bother bringing them up. I mean, this would be actual, spinal column, samples, or, cerebral spinal fluid and stuff like that. I mean, I
I
think
don't think that's
we're not.
impossible. I just think it's very unlikely. I remember there was one crew member from one mission that
Mhm.
almost did that and then didn't. So maybe that's possible.
Yeah. It could be. I just dread to even make that ask. I think what we want crews to feel when they're going to space is basically that the ask being made is relatively just so small compared to the impact of the discovery that's going to come out of it, especially for commercial crews, right? I mean, I've been repeatedly impressed by how much commercial crews really want to contribute to our knowledge of human spaceflight. If you say that, okay, we'd really like to put this here syringe into your spinal column, that I don't think feels appealing at all.
Yeah, no, that's true, and that's a really good point too about how willing commercial crews are to engage in research. I
Hmm.
mean, the data I published, it's over 90% of all astronautomics data, and it
Hmm.
came from a commercial crew. It didn't come
Hmm.
from NASA astronauts. Though I'd
Yeah.
love to have more data on NASA astronauts. That's
Hmm.
not where it came from.
Yeah.
So
What
in
studies
this
would you be willing
specific
to?
niche, the commercial sector is actually leading the way.
Glad to be a part of that. I wanted to ask, what studies would you take part in? And you mentioned your own candidacy for Space. I mean, that's been very exciting for me to hear because I know you're definitely going to be willing to push the envelope with the research that you'd conduct, not only being up there, but on yourself, maybe I
Yeah.
dare say.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to share more?
I mean, absolutely. The SOMA data isn't actually accessible to researchers right now. We're trying to
Hmm.
figure out the right pathway to make that available again. But NASA took it out of the repository. They didn't want to host it for reasons they won't necessarily disclose publicly, it appears. So, what I'm doing is I'm looking for a different pathway to get this sort of research done. The clearest pathway to me is called the Personal Genome Project. It's one of George Church's projects run out of Harvard. And what they do, I think I'd mentioned this earlier in the podcast, you publish your genome, you have your name right next to it, and anyone can download it and use it. There's no longer this step where you have to have another review board reviewing everything you're doing with the data as a researcher. So I want to be the first participant to go through this PGP process for spaceflight, open it up for future astronauts to join
Amazing.
me. I don't want to be the first and the last. I want to be the first and recruit more
First of many.
people exactly
Right.
to come with me along the way. I want to show that publishing your genomic information like this, it's not as scary as I think some of these more traditional conservative pathways make it.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we have James Watson published his genome, Craig
Hmm.
Venter did,
That's
George
right. Yeah.
Church did, and there's a whole database of people in PGP who have, and we haven't
Hmm.
seen calamity and catastrophe happen. So what I'm doing for this mission is I'm going to follow my sample collection protocols that I've been doing on other astronauts, collecting blood, urine. It's a short mission, these ones, so I don't think I can do stool before and after the flight. The timing doesn't quite work.
Hmm.
But saliva, skin swabs, everything I possibly can. Make that data completely publicly accessible through PGP.
Amazing.
Open this pathway so that
Hmm.
educators can start using this data.
Hmm.
And hopefully just open the door, open this door up even further for more people to contribute in the future. So
Yeah.
I'm competing for that seat. It's a social media campaign, which as a scientist, I'm not really on social media that much. It's a new thing for me. But I'm not doing terribly. I'm currently number 12 on the
Oh,
leaderboard.
amazing. Cool. Let's help you get further up that leaderboard for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah, to any listeners of this podcast, and I'm sure we'll share it on Ursa's page and stuff. I mean, please find Elia's page and vote for her and retweet and like and help her get up there because I mean I can't imagine a better use of the spaceflight time than this. I mean, I know there are a lot of people who could use a bit of an overview effect, and I'm sure that can be represented very, very poetically, very mystically, in art and poetry and all sorts of different ways. But let's represent human spaceflight through scientific data. I think all the art will follow from that. So definitely hoping that works out for you.
Th- Thank you so
Yeah,
much for coming on
of
the
course.
very first inaugural episode of the Join or Die on Earth podcast.
Oh, is it really the inaugural episode?
It's the inaugural
Oh,
episode.
sweet,
Yeah.
amazing, cool. Well, thanks for having me on it.
Yeah. Anytime, Josh.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, ad Astra. Take care.
Yeah. Check out Ursa Bio.
Thanks.